Hello and welcome to Truth versus Hype. In Sri Lanka, the military war is over, but the propaganda war refuses to die out. Despite the government's claims that it's doing its best to rebuild homes and trust, it's haunted by charges of war crimes, as well as allegations that it's denying its Tamil population rights and justice. Truth is always a casualty in any zone that's recovering from conflict. But over the next 30 minutes, we'll try and bring you a ground report that sifts through some of the claims and counterclaims that have become the burning questions for Sri Lanka in the aftermath of war. In our time traveling to the north of Lanka, we traveled unsupervised in civilian areas and with the army only in high security zones. It has to begin where it all ended. It's this tiny strip of land along the island's northern coast, near the town of Mullaitivu, where the LTTE and the army staged their final battle, which remains the main prism through which the world is judging the government's post-war response. The army declared it a no-fire zone in February 2009. And so hundreds of civilians fled here. But the LTTE moved in, and as many have chronicled, it became a front line of war, with civilians caught in the crossfire between the army and the LTTE. The no-fire zone has been sealed off to the media since the war. But now, to demonstrate that the government has nothing to hide, we are allowed access. We enter through the tranquil Nandikada lagoon into a landscape of utter devastation. Countless charred vehicles used by those who rushed here. Beyond them, the shattered remains of the villages of Mullivaikal that fell in this zone. Establishing definitively whether war crimes were committed or not is beyond the scope and purpose of our report. But the sheer scale of destruction here, inside Sri Lanka's last no-fire zone, is evident that the blood of innocents was spilt here, and that no one, neither the LTTE nor the Sri Lankan army, are blameless. Later we would come across these photographs taken by Mati, a resident of one of the villages near the no-fire zone. Images that would animate what we saw on the ground. People pouring in on vehicles. The first reaction to the firing and the nightmare that followed. And in our travels, encounter those who fled from the no-fire zone, who said the firing was coming from all directions.
இது கடலண்டா இங்காலே வருது நாங்க போய் கொண்டிருக்கிறது இதுக்குள்ளால வருது இஞ்சால வருது இஞ்சால வருது அப்ப இந்த சைடுல அட்டாக் பண்ணும் அப்ப இவர் என்ன செய்யறாருன்னு பத்தி தெரியாது.
We are then allowed access to the remnants of the town of Puthukudirapu, or PTK, another eerie, near-deserted museum of war. The army says it is still being demined before it can be rebuilt. PTK is part of the same disturbing geography that finds mention in the UN report. Its local hospital was heavily shelled. Again, as with the no-fire zone, the army says it's because the LTTE had taken positions in the hospital compound. This may well have been true, but the extent of the shelling seemed unduly severe. After our visit to these worst-hit zones of the war, we asked local army commanders about what we saw and received ambivalent answers. During the war, there was a lot of reports of civilians that also got killed in these no-fire zones that the army had created.
Yeah, there are some stories.
There are some
people
reports.
are saying various things, yeah.
Is there any substance in that?
I don't think so, because, of course, we have to all have to understand, war is war. When you fight a war, you either the enemy dies or you die. Whoever who does things first survives.
But here civilians died.
No,
that's the.
no, I'm not saying. That's the war between LTT and us.
Yeah.
But the problem, what civilians, I should say, that the government policy had been throughout the no casualties, zero casualty, and I think that went on very well.
There's no credible evidence at the moment to say that exactly this number of civilians were killed.
But could it have been that some civilians were killed? Is that possible?
If there is any evidence, that we have to believe. But so far nobody has given any credible evidence on that, I should say.
It's the same persistent ambivalence which has led the world to increase pressure on Sri Lanka.
I telephoned President Mahinda Rajapaksa from India and expressed my deep concern of the high number of civilian casualties.
The position of the UK is always that serious and credible reports of war crimes should be investigated.
But the country's powerful defense secretary and the president's brother says Sri Lanka's post-war priorities are different.
These are allegations without any basis. You know, you can't have these allegations, and then not only that, imagine what are the more important things for the people of this country. Yes. People of these areas who have suffered. These are the more important things. I don't think anybody is interested in the past, digging up the past. Why should we?
Forget the past, says the government, and focus on this. The winding up of Manik Farms, the last camp for Sri Lanka's internal refugees. The army says of the almost 300,000 refugees, only about 7,000 are left in Manik Farms. The rest sent home to Vavonia, Kilinochchi, Jaffna, Mannar, Trincomalee, Batticaloa. Important claims in the ongoing propaganda war. We are allowed free access to Manik Farm's last batch of refugees. They are those who lived in and around the last no-fire zones, Mulaitivu, PTK, and their memories still raw.
2009 ஆண்டு மாசி மாதம் 27ஆம் தேதி 4 கிவர் வந்து அடிச்சு என்ற வீடு அப்படியே ஃபுல்லா இருத்தி தான் எங்களை வெளிய அனுப்பிடுவாங்க. அப்படியான நிலைமையில நாங்க வந்து கிவரால குண்டு போட்டு விழுத்தினது. அப்ப அதே நிலைமையில வந்து என்ற மகள் மருமகன் என்ற புள்ள என்ற அம்மா என்ற கடைசி மகன் பொக்கணைக்கால ராணுவ கட்டுப்பாட்டுக்குள்ள வந்தது. நான் என் மகள் ஒரு ஆள் காயப்பட்டிருந்தபடியா வீட்டை கிவிர அடிச்செடுத்த காயப்பட்டிருந்தபடியா முள்ளிவாய்க்கால் போய் முள்ளிவாய்க்கால வச்சு என் மகளை எடுத்து தான் நான் பட்டுவாளால வந்து சேர்ந்தேன்.
This woman says her sons were arrested for suspected LTTE links after the war, and she is still waiting to hear about them.
மகனுக்கு 2 புள்ள, எனக்கு உழைச்சி தர ஒருத்தருமே இல்ல. 2 புள்ளியால் 3 வருஷமா இருக்கு, எனக்கு யாருமே உதவி இல்ல. தடுப்புல இருக்கிற புள்ளியில கொஞ்சம் விடுதலை செய்யுங்கள.
அவளுக்கு ஒண்ணும் புலிகள் ஒண்ணும் இல்லையா?
இல்ல ஒண்ணும் இல்ல.
அது மாதிரி
ஒண்ணும் இல்ல. சும்மா புடிச்சு கொண்டு போனது.
But what we heard most strongly is the desire to return home.
இப்ப 2 வருஷமும் 5 மாதமும் முடிஞ்சுதாங்க இங்க கேம்புக்கு கொண்டு வந்து. ஆனா இனிமே எங்களை கொண்டு விட இல்ல. எங்களை விடவும் இல்ல, அப்படி இல்லைன்னு சொல்லி விடுறேன்னு சொல்லி சொன்னாலும் எங்களை சொந்த இடத்துக்கு எங்களை கொண்டு போயில்ல. கோம்பா இல்ல திம்பிலி என்ற ஒரு இடத்துக்கு தான் கொண்டு போயிடும் மாமன்னு சொல்லினோம். அப்ப நாங்க வரையக்குள்ளங்கிற காணிகளம் வந்து நாங்க கன்னி வெடியும் படிக்கல, எங்களுக்கு எதுவுமே நடக்கல. எங்களை வந்து உங்களோட பாதுகாப்போட ஒரு நிறுவனத்தின் பாதுகாப்போட எங்களோட சொந்த இடத்துக்கு எங்களுக்கு நாங்க வந்து எந்த ஒரு இடத்தையும் நாங்க எதிர்பார்க்கல. எங்களோட சொந்த இடத்து தான் நாங்க எதிர்பார்க்கோம். 4 ஏக்கர் 6 ஏக்கர் எங்களுக்கு ஒரு சொந்த இடம் இருக்கு. அதுல ஒன்றே எங்களோட சொந்த இடத்துக்கு நாங்க போனோம்னு சொன்னால் நாங்கள் ஏதோ ஒரு எங்களோட வாழ்வாதாரத்தை மேம்படுத்தி நாங்கள் சாப்பிடுவோம்.
Camp life has not been easy. The tin roofs can turn these structures into ovens. Finding a normal rhythm for the children has been hard, and yet not all are critical of the running of the camp.
எந்த மாதிரி வேலை அங்க?
மேசன், கார்பெண்டர், மற்றது மீன் பிடிக்கிறது, மற்றது காடு வெட்டுற வேலை அது போகும்.
There is an impatience here amongst the last batch of refugees at Manik Farm to return to their homes. But other than that, there are no real restrictions against their moving in and out of the camp, apart from producing this piece of paper which just gives their details. Officials say that it will take some time because they come from the worst affected areas of the conflict. But once that process is complete, they say Sri Lanka's last refugee camp will be shut down. What the army can't mention is the politics of resettlement. Every salvo from Tamil Nadu that the refugee camps are being run as detention centers leads to a fresh batch of refugees being sent home, even if home was not fully ready. On the ground, we would find this again and again. On the outskirts of Mullaitivu, in a cluster of homes built after the tsunami, we found a family that had been sent back from Manik Farms, living in a temporary shack next to their home till their roof was rebuilt.
கொஞ்ச நாள் இப்ப நான் தை மாசம் சோமிலா வந்தா போல நான் இருக்கலாம் போயிட்டு இப்ப வந்து வேலை செய்து இங்க இருக்கிறோம்.
But there was also resilience. The neighbors seemed unconcerned. At least they were back after almost a year in a refugee camp, rebuilding their own home.
இதுதான் உங்க முதல்ல வீடு இதுதான்.
எங்கட வீடு.
செல்லிங்ல அதாயிட்டா.
செல்லில ராணுவம் கலட்டினது. அந்த கொப்ஸ்ல கலட்டி எடுத்துட்டாங்க. யார் எடுத்தான்னு தெரியாது.
எடுத்துனாங்க.
எடுத்து கொண்டு விட்டாங்க. அதே மாதிரி எல்லா ஊரும் அப்படித்தான். இது இல்லைன்னா எல்லா ஊரும் அப்படித்தான் கொண்டு போகணும்.
இதுக்கெல்லாம் அதே சேமா?
இதே சேம் தான், எல்லாத்தையும் கொண்டு விட்டாங்க.
In the village of Vattakachi near Kilinochi, bagloads of gravel are unloaded inside this home. The owner says his house fell into ruin while he was in Manik Farm, but he has taken a bank loan to rebuild it himself, perhaps even turn it into a hotel.
வீட்டுக்கு என்ன ஆச்சு?
வீடு அது இருந்த வீடு உடைஞ்சிட்டு இப்ப நாங்க சும்மா ஹோட்டல் போட்டுருக்கிறோம். உடைஞ்ச சீட்டெல்லாம் வச்சு அடங்கி கிடைக்கிற மாதிரி இருக்கிறோம்.
ஓகே, ஹோட்டல் போடுறீங்களா?
வந்தாரு ஹோட்டல் ஒன்று அடிச்சுனாங்க. அதுல
இதுக்கு யார் காசு கொடு? நீங்களே பண்ணுங்க.
நாங்க ஒரு உதவியும் செய்யல, எங்களுக்கு ஒரு உதவியும் செய்யல இது வரைக்கும்.
கவர்மெண்ட் ஒன்றும் கொடுக்கல,
ஒன்றும் செய்யல.
Nearby, in another home, the man of the house is unwell. The women have taken over to rebuilding.
நான் எக்ஸாமுக்காக வந்தது.
எக்ஸாமுக்கு வந்தியா? ஓகே.
இருக்க முடியாது
இல்லையா?
இந்த வேலை இதுகள் செய்யாதபடியால உங்களால இருக்க இயலாது.
எப்படி இருக்கீங்க பெண்ணு?
நான் ஒரு அறை தான் நல்லா இருக்கு, ஒரு அறையும் உள்ளூராந்தையும் கொஞ்சம் நல்லா இருக்கு. அப்ப இவ ஒரு மாதம் சோதனை, ஏழு சோதனை, அந்த சோதனைக்காண்டி அனுப்பி எடுத்து கொண்டு இருக்கிறோம். இப்ப நாளைக்கு நாங்கள் அங்க போயிட்டு வருவோம், யாழ்ப்பாணம் போயிட்டு. வீடு கட்டையில தானே இருக்கலாம்.
But for the poor in the same village, the hardship is always greater. This woman says she comes from a less affluent village in a forested area which is still in ruins. And so, since her return from Manik Farms, she now lives with her children in the broken home of an acquaintance.
நீங்க முதல்ல என்ன வேலை செய்யறீங்க?
முந்தி மனுஷன் இருந்தாரு, இப்ப மனுஷன் இல்ல. முதல் மனுஷன் இருந்தாரு, இப்ப மனுஷன் இல்ல. ஒரு கடையில வேலை செஞ்சேன், சிங்கிற கடையில.
இந்த உங்க ஹஸ்பண்ட் அந்த ஆம்பளை
இல்ல,
என்ன ஆயிட்டு?
அவர் விட்டு போயிட்டு வேற கல்யாணம் முடிச்சிட்டாரு.
From the poor we would hear again and again about the Indian Vita or Indian house.
Indian
வீட்டு திட்டம் சொல்லி தந்திருக்கணும்.
இந்த வீட்டு
A reference to these model homes. India has offered to build 50,000 of them for the very needy. But only a handful are ready, like this cluster outside Jaffna.
இந்த ப்ராஜெக்ட்ல வரும் 50 வீட்டா இது? இது இந்த 50 வீடு. அதுல 35 ரெடியா இருக்கு, 15 பேலன்ஸ். அது கவர்மெண்ட் எப்போ கவர்மெண்ட் கொடுக்குறதா?
அது சம்பந்தமா நமக்கு தெரியல.
நீங்க ரெடி பண்ணிட்டு
Though we met dozens of such people across the north, it is of course impossible for us to verify every single claim made by the government on resettlement. Activists assisting the government's refugee rehousing plans say for all the flaws, the government does deserve some credit.
There has been a lot of progress made. People have gone back to their areas. The people left over in Manik Farm are free to go back. but they have a difficulty in getting back to their own lands.
Yes.
The area where the government needs to do more, apart from the material things, is that land should be made available to the poorest of the poor, especially because the areas they came from are areas where you had the government land permit systems.
The refugees are home, and now roads, buildings, jobs are on the way. And if there is one city that is a model of the government's vision for the Tamil areas, it is Kilinochchi. Once capital of the LTTE's so-called Elam, or separate homeland. Today, Kilinochchi is booming. The government says it's all set to receive the benefits of southern Sri Lanka. Standing here, I can count at least 4 new banks on just one street in Kilinochchi. 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one further down. Very different from when I'd come here about 9 years ago when this was still tiger territory. They used to have something called the Bank of Tamil Elam somewhere up here. We asked people to compare life today to life under the LTTE.
முதல்ல இங்க எல்லாம் ஃபுல்லா புலிகள் இருந்தாங்க இல்லையா?
முழுக்க புலிகள் தான். இப்போ மோட நான் கதைக்கவே இல்ல.
இப்போ பெட்டரா இருக்கா?
இப்போ புலி இல்ல தானே.
இப்போ புலி எல்லாம் இருக்கு.
இப்போ புலி இல்ல, துவக்க இல்ல. இல்லைன்னா விட சரி ஒரு கதை வேணாம். இப்படி இருந்தாங்கன்னா நாங்கள் அவ்வளோதான். வாயப்பழக்க வேண்டிய. இப்போ அந்த பிரச்சனை.
I am from the person from this area. I am from Colombo.
In the same market, an unlikely sight, a businessman from southern Sri Lanka.
Last 4 years we couldn't come here because last 2 years only we are coming here. Now only the area also getting business. Right. The people also come and resettling, and we are getting business now.
Now we are getting.
But still the people are not getting the 100% income. Yes. Now only the people come and settle here.
Okay.
In near future only everything will be come into the smooth way.
As we would discover, he wasn't the only one. We ran into these Singhala schoolboys in the shattered town of PTK, out on a school tour of the north. One of their destinations is Prabhakaran's bunker, deep in the jungles near Mullaitivu. Here we would find other tourists pouring in, all Singhala, wandering through the LTTE leaders' secret tunnels. His armored doors and escape routes.
This was the emergency exit.
And while no tears may be shed for Prabhakaran, these are uneasy encounters between the two cultures.
From where?
And yet, even in this uneasy setting, we came across a Singhala family that spoke straight from the heart.
Not this falls affected not on Sri Lanka.
No, we have very freedom, so we can go everywhere in Sri Lanka. North or east or western or south, no problem.
Another landmark on the somewhat surreal war tourism trail is this Sri Lankan Army memorial built in the middle of Kilinochchi. These young boys are from Negombo in the south near Colombo.
What I can say is this: if the block is the Sri Lanka, it has been punched by a bullet.
Yes.
I hope this bullet is thrown from somebody outside of the country and tried to sabotage the Sri Lanka.
Okay.
But it has been restored by the flower high above it.
Yes.
The flag is flying. That means the country has been united again by the people.
So you think the two sides can come together, and you are the young generation,
Yeah.
future of Sri Lanka?
No, we are working to Jaffna. If I find a good girl, I would marry.
No problem with the Tamils, because all are humans.
Coming up on Truth versus Hype, the path to genuine reconciliation. Could the army be playing spoilsport? And why India's hands are tied by geopolitics. Welcome back. After the war, all the talk should have been of political solutions. But instead, it is the peacetime omnipresence of the Sri Lankan army in the north and the east which is causing the greatest concern, leading some to question whether the government is serious about the one factor that could lead to genuine reconciliation, political autonomy to the Tamil areas. The government had 10 rounds of talks on devolution with these men, Sri Lanka's Tamil parties. But now, the talks have almost broken down. It didn't help that they are a divided lot. The main party, the TNA, is called a proxy for the LTTE.
That is bloody rubbish because, now LTT is, finished on 2009. Now almost 2 years passed. And we face several elections. All the election we have a landslide victory.
For a political solution. They don't want to solve the problem.
In turn, they call men like Douglas Devananda of the Elam People's Democratic Party, who have joined the government as a minister, a sellout.
I named TNA is the Tiger-nominated agents because they are not prepared to solve the problem.
Okay, you call them the Tiger-nominated agents. They call you a stooge of the government.
Maybe. But otherwise the people voted with me, I am the only Tamil leader got more preference than the other Tamil leaders.
But for all their divisions, they agree in principle that the provincial councils, similar to state governments, will, amongst other things, have powers of land, police and revenue. This week, officials from the Power Ministry flew to Colombo to sign a 500 megawatt power project in Trincomalee on Sri Lanka's east coast. India is also repairing the strategic Kankesanturai port in the northern tip of Lanka, just a stone's throw away from the Tamil Nadu coastline. Investments as much strategic as financial. It is loudly whispered that the Indian projects in the north and east are a counterbalance to China's construction of a port and airport in Hambantota in the south and a power plant in the west. India, which is the perennial fallback for the Tamil parties, says it has pushed the Sri Lankans hard to expedite political autonomy. The recent statement by the foreign minister in parliament, the same message conveyed privately to the Sri Lankan leadership at various levels. But at the same time, New Delhi has to balance its advocacy for the rights of the Tamils with the increasingly complex geopolitics of the subcontinent. But the deeper concern is that the Rajapakse brothers, who derive their support from the Sinhala south of Sri Lanka, are opposed to giving away powers. The president is more nuanced, his brother more direct, saying autonomy is not a priority.
My personal view is there are a lot of other issues at the grassroots level. The people are more interested.
Not so much autonomy and things like that.
Because they were suffering for so many years.
Yes.
Now it's the time to give that opportunity to bring up their lifestyle.
These are the houses that we built by the army. We have them. Some houses. Earlier also I showed some houses.
So these are constructed by the army?
Yes. We provide drinking water.
This is the Defence Ministry's view of how to change lifestyles in post-war Lanka. The general in charge of Kilinochchi giving us a detailed PowerPoint presentation of the army's activities, from organizing local fairs to building houses to even organizing soccer matches.
Why do you have to have such a large military presence? And then also on top of that, the administration, the involvement of, in the civil administration, it's a question. And then we would like to, I'm not saying military should be totally absent. You understand, this is the word that I want to, but we won't accept it.
The summer holidays are over in this government school in Jaffna. It was shut for 15 years because of the war. But the children betray little sign of what it entailed to study in makeshift schools or not study at all. They are, like most young people, excited about their plans for the future.
What area you want to work in? Future jobs pannringa enna pannringa?
Future account
Account?
Account.
Account. What about you? Teacher? You?
Doctor.
Doctor?
Lawyer.
Lawyer? Oh, very nice. What about you?
Teacher.
Teacher?
Bank manager.
Bank manager? Accounting.
They will grow up in a Lanka without the LTTE. No small thing. But as new freedoms are gained, old ones must be preserved. In the end, it comes back to where we began, to the last no-fire zone. As the road through the wreckage winds towards the beach, we would discover the no-fire zone's only remaining secret. Like Prabhakaran's bunker or the Kilinochchi War Memorial, Sri Lanka's last no-fire zone is a tourist spot. You can grab a beer, get some food, and walk down to see the ship Farah, a Jordanian tanker hijacked by the LTTE in 2006. The army says that this is only open to army families, but we saw enough people who looked like civilians, Sinhala civilians. Just a few hundred yards away, the burnt stumps of trees, a reminder of where thousands of their fellow Sri Lankans died. Surely, as a starting point, this could be closed to tourism. It will show that the government understands that while the economic hardware of progress connecting the north and the south is important, no less important is justice and dignity.